God puts us in nations, in places, not by mistake, but to do a job. What if we opened our eyes to the needs of our colleagues, of our leaders, of our subordinates, and we were a priest on their behalf? Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson.
And I'm Lynn Johnson.
And we're going to be talking about how to get our business into God's business. Our subtext is Let My Business Go, and we'll have guests from around the world. So thank you for joining us this week and every week on the Repurposing Business Podcast. Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My guest today is Graham Power. Graham, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Greetings from Cape Town.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Graham, it's good to have you. I've known Graham for quite a few years, since 2003. And Graham wears many hats. Sometimes he's known as the chairman of the Power Group, which he still is, and actively involved in running the business. And then also, Graham started the Global Day of Prayer and is still very much involved in movements around the globe. And that's going to be the topic of our discussion today. Just what's God doing in the marketplace? What's he done historically? And what's he up to right now? So who better to have than Graham to talk about these marketplace movements and things that are current, up-to-date, things that are happening in the marketplace. So Graham, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Brett, and your viewers, and always a joy to chat with you, Brett.
Great, thank you. So, Graham, you've been very active in what God is doing in and through the marketplace for a couple of decades now. And from your recollection of history, where have you seen some big things that God has done in the marketplace? What are some of the highlights from your perspective of things that have either begun in or taken off in the marketplace?
Okay, so Brett, I'm 65 now. I started my working career at the age of 18. There wasn't money to study, so I started off as a trainee construction surveyor, from there onto quantity surveying, and from there onto project management. I worked for a construction company for 9.5 years before starting my own business, virtually on my 28th birthday, and we've just had our 37th birthday a few weeks ago. So one has seen a number of ups and downs. It's been interesting. Been challenging along the way. So starting your business in 1983, still in the apartheid era, lots of burning tires and lots of challenges, union challenges and labor challenges and staff and things like that. And having gone through all of those ups and downs, and then thankfully to have got into a democratic South Africa in 94. So those were interesting times. Tough times, interesting times. And of course, through the various times that there were 3 occasions that I recall where interest rates in the country went to over 24%.
Yeah.
And they were manipulated. Ahead of an election, it would drop down to, 8 or 10%. Post an election, it would be pushed up to 24%. And so one has lived through some interesting times. And I guess our parents lived through the Second World War and our grandparents through the First World War. And here we are, having, now the COVID challenge is our World War kind of scenario, just my kind of thinking. We've never had the kind of difficulties that our parents or our grandparents went through until now.
That's right. Yeah, I was listening to a guy the other day from Australia who was saying, this isn't unprecedented. I mean, our parents had 6 years of lockdown or 5 years of lockdown.
Yeah.
And I chatted to a guy in the UK the other day, and he says it's really brought the community together. They've gone back to that Second World War, First World War spirit, helping each other, neighbor helping neighbor. Kind of what's the feel within South Africa in terms of the ethos of the people, how they're responding? Well, I know South Africans they start off by making a lot of jokes about things. They're the quickest country to come out with the COVID jokes or whatever it might be. But now, as you say, you're 8 weeks into it. How are people feeling right now?
Yeah, look, it's tough out there. As a nation, this year, 2020, we've been through a downgrade by Moody's and the other houses. Our exchange rate really took a heavy beating over the last few months. And then, of course, COVID came along. Before that, our country had a 29.7% unemployment, official unemployment rate.
Yeah.
They say unofficially, if you include the informal traders, etc., it probably was closer to 36, 37%.
Yeah.
And post-COVID, it's anticipated that it will be somewhere between 50 and 55%.
Yeah.
So when half of your total workforce in a nation is unemployed, that is potential for all kinds of community unrest. Things like crime would spike.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a concern. On the other hand, I want to say that we have been through almost 10 years of a president who was so corrupt. And I say this boldly, knowing that he has over 700 cases of fraud against him, and is now in and out of court. And I really believe that this guy is going to end up in prison. He deserves it, and that it will be one of the first African leaders that will really get their due. That's my belief, my hope. So let's see. And so our new president, Repurposing, there's a lot of confidence in him. And so it's been amazing to see that the community, the business world, the church world out there have been quite tolerant of this COVID lockdown. So 8 weeks, when I say lockdown in South Africa, no alcohol, no cigarettes. These are things that were locked down as well. So the crime rate in the country, I just saw a report a few days ago, was down 70% here in Cape Town, which is a great thing. And the net loss of life has in fact been, it's gone the other way. We've lost less lives than any other time in the last 30 or 40 years, in the same period. And it's because there are no stabbings and there's no drugs and there's no, well, I won't say no drugs, but the people are not allowed to be out after 8 at night. So there's a curfew 8 at night or 5 in the morning and so forth. So right now the economy is being opened up gradually. So we've gone from level 5 to level 4 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We've got about 25% of our construction projects running. And we're now going to a further from 4 to a 3 in the next 10 days. Okay. So we should have hopefully 60 to 70% of our projects operating in the next 10 days. And, it couldn't have come earlier. It's been tough. And yet there's a lot of positives. To be kind of locked away with your close family for 8 weeks is something that does not ever happen in your life.
Yeah.
So when I think about the end of year, we have our closure, our construction sector closes from normally the 15th of December till the 6th or 7th of January. But in that time, you're either at the ocean, you're at holiday homes, you're at the beach, you're busy with things. And yes, you're with a family, but there's so many other friends and other things that you're doing. Whereas this is the first time in my life that I have been so close to my wife for this length of time. And it's actually been amazing. So the positives of spending quiet time, of really just being able to clean out some of your desk and your office and things like that, which you planned to do but never got around to.
Yeah.
So it's been quite interesting. I'm actually believing that we'll look back in a year or 3.
Yeah.
And families will talk about this as a highlight in their lives, as tough as it may be.
Right. Yeah, it does seem to be a real giant pause on the whole of society. We got so busy, really, didn't we? I mean, with all of our gadgets, our internet, all the news coming, everything. And now you're not just in Cape Town. You have to be involved in things globally. You have to be involved. There's no excuse to not be involved in things in Asia, in Europe, in America, and so on. But just to get that reset on all of that has been quite a privilege, I must say.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And coming out of that, it'll be interesting to see, Graham, whether we will do business just the same way or whether we will take the lessons out of this crisis and actually learn to work from a place of rest and be more calm and more centered. What are your thoughts on that?
The new norm is not going to be the same as the old norm, no doubt.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that it's forcing many companies, many churches, many business into reconsidering how they do business. If I think of the amount of travel that we have done for meetings and etc., and now coming to become comfortable with having Zoom calls or team calls, etc., and you just say, was all of that really necessary?
Right.
Yes, there is the need for certain interaction, and I'm very much a people person, but there's also, I think, a lot of unnecessary travel and meetings, etc., that takes place. So even education, the online training that's taking place, of course, when it comes to the townships, they don't have, an iPad and the technology and maybe the bandwidth and things like that to be able to do the kind of schooling and education that, some universities and schools have. My grandkids, to see them day after day actually continuing with their syllabus has been quite interesting to see, and I've been impressed.
Yeah.
But sadly, it's the people that can afford it that, of course, can carry on a reasonably normal life. But those in the townships are the ones that really have great difficulties.
Yeah. It's interesting. My hope for South Africa and for other nations in Africa is that this will actually spur a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in the people. Why? Because before you depended on ShopRite or Pick and Pay or Checkers to go and get your groceries, will people maybe start growing their own food? People start thinking, I can't rely on a job doing roofing or doing whatever as a day laborer. I'm going to have to not just depend on Graham Power to give me a job. I'm going to have to do something which is a bit different. And so part of my prayer and my hope is that there will be a rekindling of an entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Africans generally are quite entrepreneurial. You go to some of the nations and there's a lot of entrepreneurship. I don't think in our country necessarily it was so rife because there is a kind of at times an expectation that government will provide. And you're right. As long as any government, whether that be the US or South Africa or India or, or Australia, if you're getting a kind of a government-provided health scheme or financial return contribution each month, there's less need to be innovative or to find a job. And so it's going to be a wake-up call worldwide.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. And I've also been wondering, I know you've traveled all over Africa with the Global Day of Prayer and your work stuff, whether Africa is going to be less enamored with globalization and with the West, and whether this might cause a bit of Africa rising.
I really hope so. I have seen so many short videos and talks, and I'm talking about very intelligent people, that are giving talks and challenging, let's say, for instance, the French, who are getting so much annual monies from West Africa.
Right.
So when they gave the freedom, the independence to these countries, they kept the mineral wealth and many of the major oil wealth and business, etc.
Right.
So it's been interesting to hear the objection that is coming out from West Africa, and rightly so.
Right.
So I'm hoping that this will be a bit of a correction that is needed for Africa and the dependence on some of the historic investors and or people that have driven many of these economies.
Yeah.
When we think of South Africa and we're sitting with, I don't want to speak black and white, but let's just use this as an example. We're sitting with close to 4 million whites, which predominantly would have come out of Europe and other countries, with certain entrepreneurial skills and business acumen and so forth. And in order to see that enhanced with the black folk that and that I see growing. So yes, we've got black economic empowerment, and as a company, our shares are now in excess of 30% in the hands of people of color, and I think that's that has happened across Africa over many years, and in South Africa in the last 20 or 25 years, that's been a big thing, and we've come to it's become I won't say a norm, but it's become natural to be able to say, how can I empower others? How can I upskill them so that they are able to take an active part in the economy? And I think when we think of the years where none of that took place, and that is the stench of apartheid, leaves our country so divided. So people that live at the top of the hill are predominantly the whites. The people living in the poorest areas are predominantly blacks. And, the colored folk and Indian folk are like kind of somewhere in between. And it's starting to settle down. Mm-hmm. We know how long it's taken in America. Mm-hmm. And apartheid there is probably as rife as there's ever been, especially on a Sunday when it comes to going to church. Yeah. And so it's something that we are still working through as a nation. It will probably take another 20 or 30 years for it to settle down.
Yeah, but certainly it would be great to see the uprising of the entrepreneurial and Africa finding its identity in that respect and making a world contribution. So I think that could be a positive thing coming out of all of this. Hopefully, I know it's not just wishful thinking, but I was in Egypt in 2010 and their unemployment was 40%. And when I was there recently, it was down to about 8%. Quite a surprise. I mean, obviously a lot of big government building projects, they're building a new Cairo and so on, and somebody has to pay for that. But there is the possibility to reverse some of these massive swings that are out there, and hopefully an infusion of entrepreneurship rising up from within the black people would be part of that. Yeah. So, Graham, you've seen God do stuff in the marketplace. You've been involved in the Global Day of Prayer, and then Unashamedly Ethical. And you continue to be involved in stuff that's driven out of a blend of business and church and marketplace across all segments of society. What are you up to nowadays?
Yeah, so to say I only committed my life at the age of 43. So that was in 1998. And it was a radical shift. I don't say this with any form of pride, but being in the construction industry, it's one of the industries that's of the most prone to have corruption and collusion taking place. Mm-hmm. And I want to say to you that I was part of that ring, part of that mafia that used to do price fixing and do things which I'm not particularly proud of. Mm-hmm. And so post committing my life, it was really a matter of going and turning around the things that I knew that were wrong. And that included paying my taxes as I should, not putting things through the company books, which were personal of nature. So if you're going to build a holiday home, instead of paying for it out of your earnings, you end up, buying the materials through the company and things like that. So it took me probably 18 months to clean up my act and to start to do things right. And this thing about the construction industry, where we would, if a tender closes on the Friday, we would meet on the Thursday, the X number of contractors that were bidding on this work, maybe 8 or 10 or 15. And we would look to, pre-open the tender, decide who's going to do the work, how much would we add on overall on the markup, how would we split that extra profits between the, the tenderers, the contractors that were involved. So this was happening in a big scale. Mm-hmm. And one of the most difficult jobs that I had was to contact each of these CEOs, MDs, and say to them, sorry, guys, but we're no longer willing to be part of this club. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a popular thing. The amount of abuse and criticism that we got was tough. Yeah. And even within my own company, of my own director said to me, but Graham, some of them said to me, but Graham, you taught us to do these things. Now you're telling us we can't do it anymore. Yeah. And will we survive? Because that's where we make our money. And so it was a lot of introspection. Mm-hmm. And thank God, because of our stance and not overclaiming and so forth, clients were coming to us and negotiating work rather than putting it out to tender. And so we ended up picking up a lot of private negotiated work. Mm. And we managed to grow instead of losing ground within that period. So it turned out fine, but it could have gone the other way.
And it was a step of faith, right?
Very much so, very much so. And almost just blind faith, and just like, Lord, okay, so I've committed my life. I know this is wrong. I'm going to do this, but I don't know how I'm going to get through this. So I just lay it down and, take control.
Yeah.
So you talk about Global Day of Prayer. So in the year 2000, 2 years after I committed my life, I woke up at 4 o'clock one morning in July of the year 2000 with the clearest dream, vision. In fact, it was so clear, I call it an instruction, and that was to hire the Newlands Rugby Stadium, 50,000 seater, and challenge the Christian from all the different denominations to come together for a day of repentance and prayer. And I mean, I was so out of my depth. Prayer, kind of like, what do you mean, Lord? Repentance, what does this word mean? And I served on the board of Western Province Rugby for probably 15 years at that time. And so to go along and to say, would like to use the stadium for a prayer gathering. The chairman of the board is a Jewish gentleman, the vice president of the union is a Muslim gentleman. And lo and behold, they agreed. Now, that stadium had never been used for anything in over 100 years other than rugby. Yeah. Not even soccer, football had ever been played there. So it was a big thing. And then to try and convince the ministers fraternal in the city, and they said, but hold on, our biggest gathering has been 4,000 people. Let's first go to the parade for 10,000, then 20. We built up over 3 or 4 years. But the vision was so clear, and we just persevered. And eventually that very first gathering in March of 2001, on our Human Rights Day, it was sold out. And when I say sold out, we didn't charge for the tickets, but it was over 100% full. And we ended up having to have some satellite sites where people could go to that couldn't get tickets. So it was an amazing gathering. It's as if it was yesterday. It's so clear in my mind. And then as God showed in the vision, from there it would roll out across South Africa, Southern Africa, Africa, and then across the world. And over the next 10 years, it rolled out exactly as God had shown. And by the year 2010, there were 220 nations around the world that participated, with in excess of 350 million people. Somebody made the statement that it's the biggest prayer gathering in all recorded history. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but what I can say is that it's not thanks to me or a great committee. This was God's plan, and He made it so clear. And each of us just had to be willing and available and to play our small part. So it's been a radical turnaround in my life, and I thank God for that. To say that our industry was post the 2010 Soccer World Cup, first time in Africa, in South Africa, all these stadia had to be built, massive infrastructure that had to be built, and we were involved with a lot of that. But we refused to be doing anything unethical. In other words, we were not willing to price fix. And in 2011, there was a big front page newspaper report. Construction companies tripped up for collusion leading up to this Soccer World Cup.
Wow.
And it named 15 companies, and ours was one of the few names that were not there of the larger companies.
Fantastic.
That day I sent a memo to all of our staff, and I said, today I thank God because it's through His intervention that we are not embarrassed, being fined and being in a position of being even banned from tendering for government work because of this. So it was a godsend, and it was not of my own doing. It was because of God's intervention. Wonderful. And then the other thing you asked about is unashamedly ethical. In the year 2006, in fact, the 6th of October 2006, so here we were, Global Day of Prayer started 2001, and clearly God showed how it would roll over a 10-year period till 2010. In 2006, where this was now busy going around the world, on that morning, for the second time in my life, I woke up at 3:30 that morning with a crazy electricity through my body, shakes. I was sweating. Lauren thought I'm having a heart attack. And in that time, for 3.5 hours, I come from a conservative Methodist background, so this was like outside of my comfort zone. And in that time, God showed me how there would be 3 waves that would cross over Africa and the globe. First, a wave of prayer. Second, a wave of ethics, values, and clean living. And then would come the third. And I could only describe it as a positive tsunami. Now, when I think tsunami, I think death and destruction. I'm talking about the opposite.
Yeah.
Revival, like the world has never seen before. And had it not been for the accuracy with which that prayer initiative or vision had gone and how God was rolling it out, absolutely to the T, I would have had serious doubts. So this second wave of ethics, values, and clean living, what we call unashamedlyethical.com, that is now in over 140 nations, and it's rolling out. And then this third wave of a positive tsunami. Now, we are in the Pentecost season right now, and I want to say to you, I would not be surprised through this COVID lockdown. Where have you ever heard of nobody able to attend churches? Yet you're hearing people are more online, watching more church services and spending quiet time and in prayer probably than ever in their lives. And God took 2 Chronicles 7:14 and overlaid it over those 3 waves. If my people who are called by my name will, number 1, humble themselves and pray. Number 2, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, ethics, values, and clean living. And then I'll hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. And I believe that that is what is a promise from God, and that it's like baking a cake. You've got these ingredients. If we don't pray, if we don't seek his face, if we don't turn from our wicked ways, ethics, values, and clean living, then we can rely on God to hear from heaven, forgive our sin, and heal our land. Our land could be, talk nations. I'm saying it starts with me, my household, my workplace, my sports club, where I'm operating. That if I do everything ethically, honestly, and caring about people, then I believe that things will go well. And it doesn't mean that it's all going to be sunshine and roses. I'm still impacted by the COVID. We're still in lockdown like everybody else, Christian or non-Christian, believer or non-believer, etc. But there's an inner peace. And I believe that every one of us is born with a void.
Yeah.
And until the day that I committed Christ and invited him into my life, I was chasing success. And I had this burning desire to climb the ladder. And on that day, that inner peace that came. And I believe every one of us needs to make a decision at some other point when you invite Christ into your life. That chasing after the wind, that hollow, that void will not be filled until you've done that.
Right. And on the healing of the land, have you ever seen a time in history where the whole world is in need of healing and aware of it?
Not like now. Never.
Not like now.
And it's only when I speak to my 96-year-old mother and hear about how they had to stand in a line to get a cup of sugar or a cup of rice, and things like that, which yes, thankfully we can still, the shops are there and you can get most of what you need and so forth. But lockdown, not being allowed out, it's something that we're just not used to. And thankfully for interconnectivity through Zoom and through Skype and through WhatsApp and so forth, that we're at least able to contact our family and our friends and have some kind of community, some kind of liaison. Like I'm liaising with you right now. We probably would have done this, around a desk and around a speaker, and we would have had this discussion. So it's interesting. It's exciting times to see what God is going to do in this time. I just wait with a great anticipation.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing to see also just, I think to get down to brass tacks, you talked about the impact on the church and some people said, well, the church is closed. Well, a lot of the young people left the church 10 years ago. They left the building 10 years ago. And this, I think, has been a wake-up call for the church to say, hold on. A lot of these key people are they've been online for 10 years. They've been online for 5 years. They've been living the way we're having to live now that's the way they relate to their friends. That's the way they interact. So it's kind of also gives us an opportunity to get on the right page with the next generation, do you think?
I agree fully. And I just take Lauren and myself. For us on a Sunday, we watch our church service, and then we watch a next one and a next one of different other styles and so forth, just because we got the time. So, we click, over onto another service, and we, listen to that, and you get some great messages. And I think this is the thing with the young folk today. For them to have to get up early on a Sunday morning is already a pain. Then to have to drive and to, your parents probably say, listen, you can't go in there with your, with some tacky clothes on, because they got used to it, wearing a jacket and a tie to church. And, kids don't want that. They want to be able to go in short pants, and they want to be able to, on a nice day and things like that. So it's really getting us all to think outside of the box. And I think there's going to be tremendous positives that come out of this.
Yeah. Graham, your sense of what God's doing in the world, so there are these three big waves, but you've been talking to leaders around the world, and right now you're involved in coordinating prayer efforts and people coming together. Broad sense as to what God's doing in history at this point in time, from what you can tell?
Nobody knows God's timing. And I think all of us, it's a good thing that we are not relying on our own knowledge and history. We just all are out there on the water.
Yeah.
Just like what's going to happen next? Yeah. Will I survive this, X number of weeks of lockdown? Business have stopped. Are we having to lay off people? Are we, can we afford to pay people 70% of their normal salary for 3 months with the hope that things are going to pick up again? So it's interesting times. And on the other hand, I've seen people that have really been the hard nuts, the macho guys, all of a sudden, the guys that are asking questions about spiritual life, about what happens if, God forbid, I were to die tomorrow. And so I've had people that have been on the brink of committing suicide because they're losing their business, and are they a failure, and their kids and their family, they're letting down, to convince them that there's absolutely no ways that you can even consider that. When somebody is in such a state of depression, they're not thinking logically. And so that's been very interesting and tough. And on the other hand, you've seen the characteristics of people coming out, those that are, the bottle is always half full, and we'll make this work, and taking people along. So there's been so many interesting aspects to this time. There will be many books written, many stories told, many movies made about what's happened in this time. I don't have the answers, but I do know that I just lay it down at the feet of the cross and say, Lord, and I just ask that you'll just, I'm not having sleepless nights, as tough as it is out there, because I believe that God has allowed this, and that he will bring about a healing and a transformation even in these tough times.
And there was a Catholic priest, they were having his 30 years celebration as a Catholic priest, and they asked him, so what have you learned in 30 years? He said, I've learned that he is God and I'm not.
Amen.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. Well, Graham, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. It's always a delight to chat with you. If you want this to go viral, next time you have to bring all your grandkids in behind you. That's they
are the joy of my life. Now, luckily, 2 of my grandkids live just a few houses away from us. And so they've been homeschooling, and my daughter's been doing part of that. So even though we're in lockdown, there's been that interaction. So that's kept me alive and kept me, energized, that I could see the grandkids. And of course, we've had many Zoom calls with the others that are further away.
Yeah.
And thank God for Zoom and for technology and so on.
That's right.
But thank you very much for all of what you're doing around the world, and that you have, this is your birth country, and I know that you have plowed back tremendously into small, medium, large companies. And I just think back of 20 years ago where you were helping me to, take off my leadership team through a repurposing. And it has had huge impact on my life, on the business in which I have an interest. And many people today know the Lord because of Brett and Lynn Johnson and the Reap family. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Graham. It's a delight to chat with you. I loved Lauren and your extended family. And we look forward to having a cup of coffee in Cape Town, or if you get to Tennessee first, we look forward to that.
Or a glass of wine.
A glass of wine. Sounds fantastic. I must tell you, I'm roasting my own coffee up here now on the hill.
Well done. Well done. Yeah. Bless you, Brett.
Okay, blessings to you too.